welcome to Fox Valley Day today, whatever day it is, Fox Valley Today. I'm Anne Vickery, your host. Happy New Year, and as Jack Nicholson said in The Shining, I'm back. And today is again one of my favorite days. It's we're doing our book club Friday. We also do book club Mondays on WSPY Radio on occasional Mondays, and I'll try to give you some updates on what days we're going to be doing that. And this morning we have Rylie from the Hinckley Big Rock Library.
Hinckley.
And
It's just Hinckley.
Yeah, Hinckley. I'm sorry. I always do that, don't I? I'm so bad at that. Rylie from the Hinckley Library, and Sarah Skilton from the Oswego Library. Now, maybe I got it all out of my system. Do you think? Okay. Maybe not. Well, anyway, we're all here, and we're happy and thankful that the holidays are finally over. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn for you guys, but you know what? I think the votes are in.
Absolutely.
So, Rylie, you happen to always have one of those books. I got to tell you, I was just telling the girls off camera last month. Rylie did a book called They Both Die at the End, right? Mm-hmm. And I had somebody call in and ask about that book, and she said, you know, that's just a weird enough book that my crazy son-in-law'd like it. So she wanted to know the name of it or the author again. I thought that was pretty hilarious. So what are you reading this month?
Okay, so this month I don't have a book for display. I read it as an ebook.
Okay.
My library has 2 different ebook collections that we subscribe to. So if you have a library card, most of the area's libraries have ebooks of some sort. So if you have a library card, you can get them from home. You don't have to go out in the cold. You can download it right onto your phone, your tablet, your e-reader, your laptop, your computer, just about anything. So I read it as an ebook, but the book that I chose this month was The House We Grew Up In. Mm-hmm. It's by Lisa Jewell, and it is set in the Cotswolds. So it is very British. I chose not to look up the words that I didn't know. I just kind of absorbed it and tried to figure out all of their slang. So.
As you got into the book and
Yes.
you found out more of the meaning. Okay.
Yes. So
explain the Cotswolds.
I don't really know much about it, but it's just a cute little area of the UK.
Okay.
Kind of cute countryside, big English gardens
and nice little cottages and stuff like that. Okay.
Yes. So it's set mainly there, and it goes back and forth in time a lot. So it's a very dysfunctional family. And this is an adult book. Typically I read young adult, but this one is meant for adults. So it starts off when this family, there's the 2 parents. The mom is a little on the crazy side.
Well, most kids would say that about their mothers anyway. My mother's nuts, you know, so, but go ahead.
And Easter is her very favorite day of the year. She plans this big Easter egg hunt. No matter how old her children get, she plans this big Easter egg hunt, and they have to hunt out in the garden. And so it starts off when her 4 children are small, and she's doing this Easter egg hunt, and then you jump back and forth in time. So it's everywhere from when they were little to now they're in their 30s. Mm-hmm. So it's present day and then back 20 years or so. So there are 2 girls and then twin boys. And
no wonder she was nuts.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
But so as the children grow up, there are tragedies, and the family ends up separating completely. So the kids go off to Australia and London, and one ends up in Thailand, and there's just so much tragedy. The mother becomes a hoarder, and she's always kind of had this tendency, but once her family leaves her and she's had so much tragedy that she starts collecting things that remind her of the days that were happy. So she'll keep that broken toaster because it reminds her of that day that the toaster broke when these good things happened, you know? So the title, The House We Grew Up In, a lot of the story is about the house and what memories it has for them and what it means to the mother who is a hoarder in this home.
Okay, now you've talked about the kids to a point, and the mother is kind of the central character. Mm-hmm. What about the father?
He's in and out. He is central to their lives at the beginning, and then some different things happen, and I don't want to reveal the secrets, but he is there throughout the whole story, but it's not in the same way that he was originally.
Okay. Now, another thing I wanted to ask about when you talked about the kids all kind of going in different directions. Do they leave on because of estrangement, because they find it so difficult to live in this home that was so filled with tragedy, or was there just so much dysfunction and not being able to communicate?
All of the above. They all dealt with the tragedies and the hoarding and their mother in very different ways. So the oldest daughter, Meg, goes to London, and she still comes back and visits, but not very frequently. And every time she comes back, the house
Well, she's obviously the closest,
yes.
right?
So every time she comes back, the house is more disorganized and more full of clutter. And she ends up not really being able to deal with that, and she goes the opposite way in her life. When she starts her own life with her own family, her apartment and house is spotless. She's a neat freak. She has everything completely clean, and she throws away the kids' toys when they're not even done with them.
Yeah, and cleans up, takes the dishes off the table before you're done eating. Yeah, I'm a little obsessive like that too. So, this is kind of a different book, but you always seem to tend to go towards, and I don't want to say this, but kind of like the dark side.
Yes.
You do. You tend to, because you seem to have a maybe more of an interest in the reasons or the whats or the whys of why stranger things happen.
Yes.
Maybe in theory or in what could be real to life.
Yeah, and this one was realistic. I mean, they're an extremely dysfunctional family. Some of it, I'm sure all of it has happened to various families, maybe not all the same family, because there was kind of a lot going on with all of the characters, but it was a realistic story.
Did you find all the characters really interesting?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, all of the children go off, and some of them you hear about more than others, but they all lead interesting lives, and they kind of learn that their decisions affect the rest of their family more than they thought.
Right. That reminds me kind of in a way of a book called the Glass Castle. Right, where a mother was a hoarder and the kids had to deal through all that and what it meant to the kids down the road and how it affected them, and how they couldn't fix her. They couldn't fix their mother.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that we all look at people who are troubled or have gone through terrible things that almost become different people because of tragedy or terrible shocks in their life. You think you can fix it for them, but you cannot.
No.
So,
and this author said that she wrote about this topic because she was very interested in the hoarding on the TV shows and things like that. But on there, you always see the result. You see their horrible house in this situation that you would never want to be in, and it makes you feel good about your own house. Well, maybe I have a little clutter, but I don't have a dead cat in my living room. But
right. Well, yes.
But that they never show the backstory. They might hint at, she had trauma in her childhood or something, but they don't tell you how this happened and why these people are in such a terrible situation. So she wanted to do that. So she did a lot of studying on hoarding and what the reasons could be. So she wrote the whole backstory, and you learn why it is.
I want to ask you a question. It's a little bit personal, but I'll share something about myself. Do you find that you keep anything in particular that you're fond of? Maybe books. I don't know.
Actually, I don't own any books.
Yeah,
I've worked in libraries so long that I just check them out. I never ever buy them.
Do you have anything that you can't get rid of?
I don't really. I'm kind of a throwaway person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've found as I've gotten older, I have a tendency to keep birthday cards and notes that people sent me and obituaries. Because there's something about holding on and looking back, and maybe that's just a process of getting older, but it gives me a warm feeling to be able to think of those people that might have thought enough of me to send a card, or to reread an obituary of someone I knew of and knew them well. I don't know. There's maybe some of that in me, but my box is like this. That's it. Well, Sarah, welcome. And what are you reading? You always read something that's always a little bit more kind of edgy, fictional, and
thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't think so, but I'll take
I
it.
mean, I don't see any big
Absolutely.
romance novels in your
Next month.
Okay.
You got it. This month I read something called The Immortalist. It's actually coming out next week. It's by Chloe Benjamin. This is her second book. She's 29 years old and she grew up in Madison. Or, I'm sorry, pardon me, she lives in Madison.
Okay.
This is also a family story. It's about 4 siblings who are from the east side of New York City, and they range in age. The oldest, Vera, is 13, and it goes down to there's an 11-year-old, and 9-year-old and 8-year-old. And the 4 of them find out that there is this kind of a soothsayer, will tell you, they find out that they'll tell you exactly the date and day that you'll die. So the oldest son says, let's go do this. So the 4 siblings tromp off and they meet this soothsayer, and she tells them the exact day and date they'll die. And the whole story then of the book is each decade they go through the history, and each of the siblings then, some of them die very young, some of them die very old, and it goes from San Francisco during the 80s in the Castro district to Vegas during, one of them is a magician in Vegas, one of them is a researcher on longevity and she's a scientist, and one of them is a doctor and he works with the military. He's a military doctor. So you reach, not only is it more about how do you live? When do you live? What does it matter if you know when you die? Are these actually, are they self-fulfilling prophecies that they know they're going to die on this date, so they live a way that they will die on that date? Or is it actually a little bit of magic? You never really know, and the book doesn't say that. So it's for adults, but high school age can read it. It's really good for something like a book club. It has all different kinds of things. It goes from, using animals in science to, Vegas and all kinds of ethical and different kinds of ages, and it's very interesting. It goes through all this history. You go along with the siblings.
So maybe I shouldn't ask this question, but I will anyway. Do they all die on the date that they?
They all die. Well, they all die at the end.
Yeah, here we go again.
But the point of it is we all die. It's a mortality issue,
Yeah.
and we will all die. And is it help knowing the date? Do you live your life differently? If you know you have 80 years, are you going to live your life quieter and not do what you should have been doing if you know you only have 20 years?
So after you read that book, and you had to think it through.
Yeah.
Do you wish you knew the date?
Oh, I wouldn't want to know the day. I'd still want to live like I knew the day. That I should be, every minute counts.
Every minute
But
counts.
it's a family story, and you certainly at the end of it, it's the siblings are the center of it. It's still the family and how they interact and how important siblings are. And it goes from that moment in time when you still have your siblings as your friends and do everything together to the moment that you realize as you get older that the siblings are the ones that kind of stuck around and know you the best.
And do these 4 kids, again, we got 4 kids in
Yes,
my
I was thinking that was so similar there.
But these kids didn't all live together, live close by.
Oh, no.
They
They
moved
San Francisco,
but they stayed in
Vegas.
contact.
Some of them did and some of them didn't, and then the loss of not staying in contact was also part of the story, how they wished they had,
Right.
making sure they still had that sibling bond in the family.
Well, again, sometimes estrangement in families, and I just read a huge article on estrangement, is self-imposed.
Right.
Sometimes it's just kind of, well, it just happened. He didn't call and I didn't call, and pretty soon we just didn't have anything to talk about.
Exactly, and that was one of the regrets. I should have contacted the youngest brother, was a ballet dancer in San Francisco. I should have contacted him. I had all these years. I was my pride and his pride, and he thought I'd be embarrassed. That kind of thing. But
because he was gay.
Yeah. Yes. Actually.
Yeah,
so
and
it was
nobody
the 80s.
wanted to, and this took place in the 80s.
That portion
where
took place
at that
in the
point,
80s.
what shame there had to be if you had a gay brother.
Exactly, during the AIDS crisis. So there's the 80s, and then one sibling's in the 90s,
Right.
the 2000s. It goes through each of the history, and they kind of get different
Right.
parts of the world. So it's really cool. It's a great book.
Yeah.
I highly recommend
So
it.
you said this was her second book.
This is her second book. Her first one was on, I think, interpretation of dreams kind of thing, but she feels this one was her she really enjoyed this one and writing this one. She said she has an idea, every 5 years or something. So
Right.
that was
I
an
wish-
interview from Book List, which the library gives out from our friends of the library.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the book. This is the list. Now, I should say a week ago, a month or so ago, you came in with somebody came in with a list that said, what the librarians are reading.
Library reads, yes.
Okay.
This one's, the book list is a magazine. It's a free magazine the library gives out, compliments of our friends of the library. And you can pick them up, and it has what books are coming out, interviews with the author, and there's actually an interview with this author.
Yeah,
here,
and these are free books. This is a free magazine
It's a
that's
free
given
magazine
out
that
at
the friends of the library provide it, and then it's given out. It's right on our counters at the
Okay,
public
well,
to take a
you know,
look
I
at.
might steal this from you.
That is yours.
You might, I might have to, beat you down the stairs and grab it from you, you know.
It's free.
As you're trying to run out the door on me, yeah.
It's a monthly
well,
magazine.
This sounds
so.
like a really interesting book, both of them.
Yes.
You know, I came from a large family. I mean, there were 6 kids. And, you know, I'll share with you, 5 of us are, I mean, I would say I'm closer to all of them overall than anybody else. I talk to all of them except one. And nobody talks to him except my one sister, because he does not want anything to do with the rest of us. You know, that I'm sharing that and that, but just to say that estrangement, and his is more self-imposed. It's where he wants to be. And, you know, I could go into all the details on that, but I won't. But it does happen. It's not unusual. And I think people, and I think in the books like this help open up that subject as to, you know, why some of the times those things happen. And whether it's with parents or siblings or your own children, you know, it's a tough thing to go through. Well, thank you very much. We're going to finish up. We're going to take a little bit of break. We're going to be back with Mary Hauge, and we'll be talking about what she's read this month. Again, the 2 books that these ladies are recommending are The House We Grew Up In by Lisa Jewell and The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin. So both great reads, and you can see how interesting they are because we have interesting librarians. Okay, we'll be right back. Stick with us.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that! That's disgusting! Oh, poop already! You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
We'd do anything for kids. Yet 1 in 6 children in the U.S. struggle with hunger. Help end childhood hunger near you. Learn how at feedingamerica.org.
Your son wants to get a cat, but you're allergic. Do you A, prepare yourself, B, make the best of it,
C squared equals
25.
Good job.
or C, find a loophole? When it comes to parenting, there are no perfect answers, but that's okay, because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Welcome back to Fox Valley Today. I'm here with Mary Hauge from the Big Rock Library, and I'm always the person who always thinks Hinckley and Big Rock are the same libraries because you do have to share a school district. So whenever I say Hinckley, I always think Hinckley, Big Rock. So anyway, Mary from the Big Rock Library has brought us the book Endurance, right?
Correct.
And who wrote that?
This one is an astronaut who spent a year on the International Space Station.
His name is Scott Kelly.
Oh yeah, the brother-in-law to the
You're right.
congressman that got shot. Yeah.
You're right. He has a twin brother, Mark.
Right.
And then Mark is married to Gabby Giffords,
That's
who
for
is
sure.
the lady. And this happened when he was out in space. So there's the trauma of dealing with a family member who needs compassion and that, and not being able to do anything about it at the time.
Right. So, you know, it was kind of interesting, you know, as they talked about, you know, and I don't know a whole lot about it, only what I read maybe in the New York Times or in the Time magazine or whatever, but he actually shrunk some when he was, or did he grow some? Which did it
No.
happen? He shrunk.
Shrank.
Okay, I don't need that, unless it was this way. So tell us why you like the book.
Well, there again, you brought up the idea of how space changes things, and it does. There isn't gravity there, so things like eyes are affected. That with gravity holding the eyeball in earthly gravity, it's one vision, and a lot of the astronauts come back and they are sort of nearsighted. Sometimes it's temporary, sometimes it's permanent. And
Really?
things like bone loss. When there's no gravity, the calcium from the bones leaches out tremendously quickly.
So would that be good for your arthritis or bad?
Oh, no.
It would be bad.
Definitely be bad, because then the bones are brittle. He had said that 2 of the astronauts had had hip fractures after they came back, and that's not something that I ever had heard about.
Really? So your bone loss, your bones actually shrink down.
Right.
And they get
become
thinner.
very porous, yeah.
Right.
Very thin.
No kidding. So
So-
continue on. I'm not a space traveler, but I might pick that book up.
Well, it's definitely interesting in that things that you expect to know about space weren't true. Space has a smell. Now, that caught me by surprise. He had said that things that have been out in space smelled like sparklers that have been burned, or burned metal, that you can tell, say, the outside of a space capsule or something from the, different odor that it exudes.
Okay, so maybe because of the terrific heat when they're going through the atmosphere, it gets back into the cabin.
Could be.
Because you
So-
certainly couldn't smell anything from the outside. I mean, if you were out on a spacewalk, I mean, you're so
Oh, yeah,
encapsulated, you know. But anyway, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
And I thought too that, probably out there it's very quiet, and wrong. There are so many systems going and pumps and things like that. Even, you're right, in this encapsulated spacesuit, there's always that hissing of, oxygen.
And little clicks and things.
You got it. And
right.
you'd be panicked if you didn't hear them.
Okay, now I got to ask the question that probably every 4th grade kid needs to ask. Does he talk about using the bathroom?
True. Not to any huge extent. He does go into that, and apparently it's been modified from the early days. This was his 4th time in space, and he set a record, because to be there for an entire year is really a long time. I didn't realize these people are diapered once they take off. That so many times there are countdown delays, and they don't exactly leave when they're supposed to, and stuff like that. So.
And once they're in the capsule and they're being propelled into outer space, there's hours and hours and hours that they are they can't move out of their position.
Correct.
That would be bad for my restless leg syndrome.
Oh, it is. It sounds very cramped, very uncomfortable.
Right. Claustrophobic.
Oh, true. There are people that can't do that because of being claustrophobic.
What about did he talk about getting any vertigo or losing balance or?
No, that's a big one. That a lot of times it's sort of like being on a rambunctious carnival ride, I believe. And he said that oftentimes that adjustment to no gravity takes maybe even 4 to 6 weeks to undergo that you feel very disoriented, sick, nauseous.
Really?
So it just depends on the individual there, on how they react.
So does gravity affect the swallowing? Is that or is that, that's all muscular, we realize that. that when you chew, when you swallow, all those muscles in your throat and all the way on down. But I wondered if it created any, I guess I should say GERD.
Well, you're right, and I don't know. That wasn't specifically, now obviously they can't pick up a cup or something like that, that these are in sealed packets that you kind of suck them down.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, all this stuff is floating out in the space station, so there could be crumbs and loose hair and just
And they have to be kind of very careful about
Oh,
that, don't they? That the
extremely.
liquid isn't
You
let
got it.
loose in that cabin.
Absolutely.
So what did you find? Was there anything in particular about this book that you found just absolutely fascinating?
I think all sorts of little tidbits along the way there of what this is like, the guts and fortitude to be able to do this. It just was a very interesting, enlightening book. And he intercuts it. The second part of the title is A Year in Space, A Lifetime of Discovery. And so it kind of goes back and forth to what he was like as a youngster growing up, how he was inspired. I figured this man was probably focused on space and passionate since he'd been 3 years old. Definitely not true. You know, a very indifferent student, smart, but not, you know, he'd just kind of do what he could to get by.
Right.
And you know, talk about the power of reading. As a college student, he'd picked up Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff as a book and read it, reread it.
Is that about Neil Armstrong, The Right Stuff, or was that just that was a book about astronauts?
You know, I have to go back and look at that.
It was, yeah.
You
I
know.
think it was about Neil Armstrong.
So, but he was just absolutely
Fascinated.
Yes, and that kind of set him on this course. His brother was an astronaut before him, and then to go ahead and apply, it's a really rigorous application.
So was he in the Navy or in the Air Force? Was he a military man and then went from there?
He was really heavy into science kinds of things in his college program. And then you're right, deciding with pilots, he was in the Air Force.
Okay.
So
A lot of them are, and then yet, like you said, a lot of times they're scientists or doctors or people who specialize in certain things that, you know, they've never flown an airplane in their life, and they're
Right.
just trained to be an astronaut.
Right.
So anyway, who would enjoy this book?
You know, anybody with space interests, or if you read broadly to discover all sorts of things, geared for adults, but teens who are interested in space, science.
I'm wondering, I have a 14-year-old granddaughter who's very science orientated. I'm wondering if she would enjoy that. What do you think?
You know, I'd ask her. She would say either yes or no. So,
Well, I mean, she probably wouldn't want to hurt, if she thought Grandma would buy it, she wouldn't want to hurt my feelings, so I know that. So maybe I'll buy the book for me, or maybe I'll take Riley's advice and start downloading some books, since I think that's the cheaper way to go.
it is.
Do you have ebooks?
We do.
And how popular is that for people to download the books?
You know, in weather like this, it's like the perfect answer. We have the ones that are available as eRead Illinois. So the little app is Access 360. And there are 22,000 materials that are there, which is much more than our library could hold. So there's a little bit of everything.
And does that particular app do any of the bestsellers? If that was a bestseller?
Okay. Oh, it is a bestseller. It's been on the books, particularly at Christmas time,
Okay.
for reading for men. You know what? I haven't checked to see whether that's on there or not.
Well, maybe we'll do that. Mary, thank you very much for coming over today.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining our little book club on Friday. We'll be giving you some dates to do our book club Monday on WSPY Radio, so to have a listen, and I think I'll see you Monday. I think I'm back to work again. Okay, thanks for joining Fox Valley today. We'll see you next time.